Demon Slayer has its disappointments. I know, I'm sure these words are absolutely shocking despite how much of a cult classic the anime has become. Before I get into the weeds of things, I wanted to start this video out with a disclaimer that I love this anime with a passion. Hence, it's the reason why I cover it so extensively on the channel. From the tear-jerking Hinokami scene in episode 19 of season 1, Zenitsu falling asleep for the first time, Rengoku setting his heart ablaze, the climactic finish against Upper Moon 6 Gyutaro and Daki, and so many more memorable moments, this anime is filled with so many things that I love about the anime genre as a whole. Not to mention, it's a subtle reformatting of the typical shonen formula that we're used to, with our main protagonist Tanjiro being a genuinely nice guy, as opposed to someone who seeks strength above anything else. But I think you need to be really careful when you start to throw out words such as I don't think anything's perfect, frankly, and that's also the case with this show as well. Being wrapped up in this beautiful show, I figured that it would only do the community justice not only by making videos highlighting the show's best aspects, but also its worst ones. So join me as we look into some ideas of Kimetsu no Yaiba that I truly wish were expanded upon and left me feeling like there was some wasted potential there. But before I jump into the content, I want to say that I'll be talking about some of the later manga chapters of Demon Slayer, so if you're not caught up with the manga this far, please proceed with caution. Let's get into today's video. The first notable disappointment for me was Doma's cult, the Eternal Paradise. Seeing Upper Moon 2 Doma for the first time, I was fascinated with his backstory and found myself deeply curious to see what molded this psychopathic killer into what he was. Feeling no remorse at all, he grew up around a cult that essentially praised him as a religious icon, yet didn't really feel for him at all. Their praise for him was all for selfish and self-fulfilling reasons. Being aware of all this, whilst being unable to feel any emotion in the slightest, Doma read the emotions of his cult like a book and bent them to his will, even expressing a fake sadness at one point for how idiotic he thought his followers actually were, by looking up to a kid to solve their problems. In my opinion, I believe this could have been a huge opportunity for a story arc in Kimetsu no Yaiba. While we did get the Entertainment District arc, which is essentially the stomping grounds for Gyutaro and Daki, an arc where we could have had an inside look into Doma's cult would have been such an interesting perspective into these brainwashed individuals. While Demon Slayer has its source of dark moments as seen in many of the flashbacks, it's rare that we get a look in the present storyline of something so dark, depressing, and terrifying as the cultist mentality. I understand that the Infinity Castle arc needed to have its fair share of villains to simulate an all-out war environment, but I find it weird that Shinobu, one of the smartest and calculated of the Demon Slayers, was never able to figure out Doma was the demon who killed her sister, and even more so was the leader of a huge cult, which would really serve to add to the world building of the story, something that I would say is one of Demon Slayer's weaker areas. Sometimes it feels as if the manga jumps from one arc to the next without really taking its time to properly integrate the amazing time period it takes part in. Not to mention, I think that this arc would be the perfect opportunity for different characters to have interactions with one another, like Inosuke and Shinobu. They're both characters who have lost loved ones due to this crazed demon, and it would have been a really cool interaction to see how these two connect through their shared trauma. While we're on the topic of demons, there's one set of demons we really didn't get to see a whole lot of. These were the lower moon demons that Muzan slaughters at the end of season 1. This aspect of the show has always been a love-hate relationship for me, because on one hand, I see the extermination of the lower moons as a really good plot device to show us, the viewer, exactly how Muzan operates. But on the other hand, I can't help but feel like having all these potentially prominent individuals being wiped out in a single location was a little disappointing. Take, for instance, Lower Moon 1 Enmu. While I'm sure he did get massively stronger through the injection of Muzan's blood, seeing the interplay between his blood demon art and the battle against Tanjiro and gang was such a cool and interesting dynamic. Using his dream manipulation blood demon art as a tool for Tanjiro to essentially confront the past he's so scarred by was such an emotional and jaw-dropping moment, not to mention the intense scenes where he was repeatedly killing himself in the dream world to stay fighting in the present world. All in all, I support Gotoge in her decision to kill off these promising characters, but part of me wishes that we were able to see more from them and their interactions with the Demon Slayers we had come to know and love. Perhaps have these lower moon demons be the underlings to the upper moon demons during their respective arcs, and give Demon Slayers other than the Hashira a chance to have their big win over a formidable opponent. Rounding out the third spot on the list of things I felt were lackluster about Demon Slayer is a demon who was once a lower moon but became an upper moon. Understandably, having to replace Gyutaro and Daki after their defeat, I understand that Kaigaku didn't have a whole lot of screen time to flesh out his character. This, I think, is in part due to the nature of the final arc in the story and Gotoge wanting to focus the spotlight on other characters. But believe it or not, there's a ton of history with this character. The first and most notable relationship he has is of course with his fellow thunder-breathing student, Zenitsu. I love how this character is someone you love to hate and makes for the perfect foil against him. While Zenitsu is relatively shy and humble, Kaigaku is brash and arrogant. While Zenitsu looks up to his sensei, Jigoro Kawajima, with nothing but respect, Kaigaku tramples on his teachings and questions why he ever chose to take Zenitsu under his wing in the first place. In addition to this, we also learn through Gyome's backstory that Kaigaku was the orphan who ran from the temple, blew out all the wisteria incense, and sold out everyone to save his own life from a demon. This led to the tragic events taking place that ultimately led Gyome down the path of becoming a demon slayer at all. Apart from Kaigaku's interactions with Zenitsu, he's a massive player in the events that mold the characters we know them to be today and connects to the lore of the story in many more ways than we might initially think. Not only did he do a terrible thing once by selling out a group of defenseless orphans, he disobeyed his master's orders by becoming a demon, causing him to commit suicide. This is a masterful way to set up the actions of a future antagonist by Gotoge. It's just that I don't think we get to see enough of him. I would love it if we got some extra scenes during the Infinity Castle arc where Gyome ran into him before the fight with Kokushibo, recognizing how far he had fallen. You see, Kaigaku is exactly the type of character who makes you question what kind of backstory would a character like this have to go through to end up this mean and cynical. There are generally so many open questions when it comes to this character, and it would have made Zenitsu's climactic fight with him so much more impactful than it already was. Last but not least, we have Upper Moon 4, the person with debatably one of the most overpowered and interesting blood demon arts in the entire story, and felt completely overlooked. Similar to Kaigaku, it felt as if the nuances of her character were entirely skipped. The entire notion of her being able to play her biwa and change the landscape of the final arc was an amazing and very cool premise. But it felt to me as if this character was more used as a tool to facilitate the changing landscape than an actual character. Now, don't get me wrong, I understand that she's the strong, silent type, but her battle with Igoro and Mitsuri would have been the perfect opportunity for her to show potentially different techniques and how she could manipulate the Infinity Castle to be an offensive threat as opposed to solely a defensive one. Regarding her past, I know we get a backstory by Gotoge apart from the main story displaying how she was eventually turned into a demon by Muzan, but I wish it was incorporated into the Infinity Castle arc itself. Ultimately, in the present storyline, all we get is a sad character who's unfortunately off-screened by Yushiro and ultimately killed off by Muzan for being a liability, suffering from what makes you feel like Gotoge was rushed and had to look over many characters as a result. As I said earlier, Demon Slayer is a great show filled with many fantastic themes, concepts, and characters. I'm really wishing during the upcoming anime seasons we get a lot more content to fill the gaps where the manga was unfortunately rushed. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on where you think Demon Slayer didn't quite hit the mark. Leave a comment down below. If you enjoyed this video, consider liking, subscribing, commenting your thoughts, or supporting the channel in any way you see fit. To watch more of this style content, I'd recommend you check out my latest video analyzing the snake pillar, Obanai Iguro. As always, it's been Dill from Anime Analysis, and until next time, stay curious, anime fam. Peace.